All right, so going to be reviewing this morning's options trades. Was another pretty solid day. Let me just go back in time real quick. Okay, so my big pivot from yesterday is 68.98. Unfortunately, that broke overnight, so I wasn't able to really make any money doing that. Otherwise, here are some pivots to the upside. NQ still had one pivot left from last Friday. ES was the 68.98 and it broke before market open. And this is pretty much what my pre-market looked like. Overall, I was fairly neutral. The nearest major point of liquidity is this pivot right here on NQ at 24,801. So I am leaning bearish to this pivot, which does absolutely nothing for me because we are pretty much already there. Probably going to break a market open. However, I did say that if we invalidate a majority of this drop, then I will be bullish for this pivot and possibly even this one. But I'll be bullish for these pivots to break. Ideally, it would be awesome if we bounce and then invalidate that bounce so I can enter puts to break this demand. But that did not happen. So what did happen? Well, the market opened. Pretty bearish market open. Dumped right into this super heavy demand. My next pivot is 24,736 on NQ. It's not a very big pivot though. Not a huge previous reversal point. Not a very big deal, small time frame. And lots of demand right here. Lots of demand. Well, here, this is where I took my first trade. I think it was decent. Looking back on it, it's definitely more aggressive. The trading was a little bit more aggressive today, which worked out in my favor. This first trade, not so much though. So as you can see, we put in a big drop. We've invalidated that big drop. ES is currently a lot stronger than the NASDAQ. A lot stronger than the NASDAQ. As you can see, NQ put in this huge selling wick. And, we have a baby super minor pivot here on ES and here on NQ. I'm thinking, okay, there's probably a pretty dang decent shot that we are going to get to this level. And by the time we get to this level, NQ should be somewhere up here. And by the time NQ's up here, I'm also going to be bullish for NQ to get to here. So ideally, ES is going to get somewhere up here, maybe even supply. Now, this is an early entry, though, and implied volatility is high, so I did only enter half size on this trade. I filled the SPX 0-day calls, I don't remember the strike, at 2.65. And this is pretty much what the trade looked like. And it was actually a terrible open this morning. I don't remember exactly where my stop loss was. I think it was just 1-to-1. Yeah. Pretty terrible open. NQ was still weaker than ES, though. It looked like NQ was trying to come back down and maybe get to this pivot. I couldn't tell. On this candle here, ES flipped weak, so that was no fun. And by this point, my contracts were shredded. The implied volatility was a disaster. I think I was already down 30%, and I've only had one small red candle. Like, I'm one small red candle away from my entry. So, very unfortunate contract shot. Now, keep in mind, I'm half size, which is important. And I believe it's at this point right here, that I say I'm expecting to stop out. NQ made higher highs with these selling wicks and retraced back down. I'm thinking NQ wants new low of day and then this pivot here. So I'm expecting to stop out, and then maybe I'll re-enter longs if we bounce from that point. However, if that doesn't happen, and ES invalidates this red candle and the red wick of this candle, so if we get back up to here and close or get close to closing a candle at those levels, I'll add my second half. And it'll, even though it's technically above where I entered, it'll most likely end up being an average down because these contracts were getting absolutely destroyed this morning. This open was terrible. Yeah, so I think it was like right here. I don't know. You guys can look in my channel and see the screenshots. It got close. I think this is where it was. Something like this. I don't remember. Or no, it was this high. But really I was looking for something, yeah. Something like that. All I know is it didn't get to my stop loss. Very close to stopping out here. But you can see that ES is making lower lows with buying wicks. I was about to add my second half to this trade, second half of SPX calls, but we closed with a huge selling wick. So if this selling wick invalidates, I'll add. Looks like NQ still wants new low of day. I actually marked this pivot out here now as a result. At this point, ES flipped weak, looked like game over. But then all of a sudden I got lucky and I actually did add. So I doubled my position size when I said I would, pretty much right here, which ended up being an average down. Now I filled initially here at 2.65. My average down up here, I filled at 2.2. It's about the contracts chopped. I did take a decent trim here because the contracts were chopping so bad. But ultimately, I was looking for NQ to get to this pivot, and it did. NES got to the supply as well. This is pretty much where I sold everything else. I sold everything else here. So first trade ended up being pretty good. I think I did 55% from my average down. So I think my average was 2.4. Between 2.4 and 2.45, and these got to, I think 3.8 or something. No, I think it was like 4. I don't remember. What I do know is I calculated it. It was roughly 50% gains here. That was pretty good. Fortunately, I didn't hold the entire position to 50% gains mark because I had to trim because it was chopping so bad, but it looked great. Well, now ES tries rejecting supply. NQ looks beautiful. NQ looks like it's going to get to supply. I don't really have a call entry on the NASDAQ. Its next pivot is all the way up here, which is kind of far, and it's protected by a couple supply zones. ES is looking extremely weak. Now, if we invalidate a majority of this drop, or sorry, a majority of this run, it'll look really good for puts because we still barely missed low of day, and based on how much NQ wanted to drop earlier, I'm thinking if we can invalidate majority of this run, it's a pretty safe bet to here before we get a bounce. So that's what I'm thinking. At the moment, ES is a lot weaker. I'm just waiting for a majority of it to invalidate. And that's what happens here. Now, I filled this trade, same thing, half size. I didn't trust any initial full-size entries because of how much my first trade chopped. And I did fill it full size. There's pretty much what I'm looking for. And here's pretty much my stop loss. Now, NQ invalidated this selling wick, but didn't actually make a lower low. So I'm actually really bearish for it to make a lower low. So if we happen to bounce here on NQ, it's what I did last week. Worked beautifully. It worked solid. Close to 90% of the time, I'd like to believe. So I actually start averaging into the rest of my trade on this bounce, which is pretty much the highs of these candles. Not on this candle. Pretty much the highs of these candles. So it was a bit of an average down for me, just a little bit. And by this candle, it's pretty much full size. Unfortunately, though, it actually looked like we short squeezed. And I stopped out right at the beginning of this candle. Right when this candle opened green and invalidated the selling wick. Hit my stop loss, just market sold it. Looked extremely bullish. There is a lot of selling pressure down here. You can see the selling wicks down here. It's trying to bounce but being suppressed. I thought it was a little bit more likely to stop loss raid, but it ended up short squeezing, which was this candle. And then right after this candle, what happened on ES and NQ? Mostly NQ though. Actually closed a red candle, but right as we got this big short squeeze candle, we got a selling wick. So sellers are stepping back in to try to suppress this bounce. And we actually had a red candle here invalidate almost half of that green candle, or just about half. But the candle, this almost doji, ended up closing. This one closed green. This one closed with a huge buying wick, invalidating those new short entries, which thus catalyzes another short squeeze because there's just continual shorts kind of piling into bounces. Which I saw right at the start of this candle, hopped out, and by this point, I'm pretty dang bullish. I'm still light green on the day. I think I lost like 25% on the trade, something like that. I don't remember. It was like 25 to 30% on the trade. What I know is I'm green by like 120% trade, so pretty mildly green on the day. At this point, I'm not only bullish for NQ to get to this pivot, but ES looks pretty bullish to get to this one. even though we have supply here. These are fairly weak supply zones, and it looks like this is starting to pick up momentum. Also, one key part of this uh, big green candle that a lot of people miss is look how small the volume is. Really big candle, very low volume. That is pure buy orders, right? Pure. Most of the orders that happened to create that candle were buy orders and sellers closing their positions, which are buy orders. So that is extremely bullish. When we get the second candle, which is just as big, or if not a little larger, and now we're starting to get more of a volume spike, but it's not out of proportion still. It's a much smaller volume spike than this huge red candle here. So everything still looks proportional. Volume, momentum looks fantastic to actually establish a trend and continue. And now I'm just kind of looking for an entry. Well, we get very close to this pivot. And then we put in a red candle. And right at the start of this red candle, I'd say in my chat, you know, I'm willing, well, I say this live because I'm live trading. What I say live is, would love to enter, but I just can't enter at high of day with nothing. Like, we're just at supply, we're at high of day, can't really enter. But if we barely miss this pivot and somehow magically pull back, I'll add QQQ calls. QQQ is stronger, or the NASDAQ is stronger than ES right now. And if we can barely miss it and pull back, I'll buy Q calls. It won't be quite a full-size position because it's super aggressive. And that's exactly what happened on this candle. Right at the beginning of this candle, it opened red. We dipped. Obviously, I don't have time to type the whole alert, so I just quickly bought and told you guys while the candle was still red. So if you were paying attention and on your game, you could have caught it. I said, buying QQQ calls on this dip, and I pinged you all, right? That's the best I can do. And I actually filled my QQQ calls. They were the 608 calls. I filled them at 71 cents. I think they bottomed here at 69. So I got a pretty decent fill. And right now I'm looking for this level. Now, if we continue bullishly pulling back, I'd love to add. As you can see, ES is a perfect double top here. That didn't end up happening when you had short squeezing a little bit more. But we put in another candle, which is a red candle. And at the start of this candle, I said, if this red candle, if we pull back bullishly before the next pivot, because I'm really confident in this trend, and in parentheses, I said bullishly means small red candle with buying wick, right? Then I will actually average up on my calls to get this to a full-size position. And that's exactly what happened on this. I entered initially at 71 cents. I think I added somewhere around 92 cents or something. And it was beautiful. ES ended up flipping stronger. We got to my ES pivot. My final PT was pretty much this last NQ pivot, and then I'm out of pivots. I'm out of price targets. There's nothing anywhere near until this supply all the way up here. We did end up getting there, and I closed everything out. And it did definitely got higher. It actually got a lot higher. I closed everything out on this candle. If you end up holding to that last candle, obviously it didn't. I trimmed on the way up. But I got 111% gains after it got this pivot. It ended up going close to, or I think it might have gotten 200%. I don't know for sure. Oh, wait, yeah, I can see it. It got really close to 200%. It got to $2. My initial entry was at 71 cents. And obviously, it wasn't 150% because, it wasn't 111% obviously for me because I averaged up, but I don't care, right? That's from the initial alert price. So you did really well if you took that trade. 111% gains, and just like that, today went from very mild green to pretty solid green. Not super bright or anything crazy, but a really solid green day. Like, very happy with it. And then I ended up taking just one futures trade today before I left a little bit early. And it was this bullish consolidation here. All of this was done live, of course, because I just do my futures live trading right after my options trading. Filled my position. Was it here? No, it was here. Yeah, I filled my position here. I ended up taking it to a fib extension level because there's nothing here. If you look at this drop, there's no pivots on the way down. There's up. It's just straight down. I'm not going to supply this too far away. The nearest major fib is actually under my entry. The next 78.6 is all the way up here, which is useless. So I ended up just taking a fib extension from here. And I just went to the 78.6. Not a great fib to go to. The 61.8 is a much bigger deal. But that's pretty much what happened. And my stop loss was like right here. It was like 1.6 or something. Really good trade. It worked out beautifully. Had some minor pullbacks, but yeah. And we pretty much sold the top, which was really nice. So that was my day. Pretty much just super basic. The first two trades were super basic, just invalidation of moves, right? Liquidity momentum trades. And then my third trade, which was a complete snipe, was it started out as a scalp, right? This was just supposed to be a scalp trade. The trade that I entered right here, and I'll clear this out. The trade that I entered right here, kind of at the bottom of this wick, was just supposed to be a scalp to roughly here when ES cleared this pivot. But when I saw this candle above this, I'm like, oh, yeah, we're not turning around until at least the next pivot in my mind. So that's why I ended up averaging down. And when we broke through this, we did not get a reversal candle. Nice continuation, nice follow-up, and then we finally did get a huge volume spike. And notice the volume too. The volume is staying super proportional, super steady. This candle had super high volume, which I didn't like. That was the only bad thing. But other than that, very low red volume following that, and nice decreasing green volume going the way up. A lot of people assume that's like a bearish thing. It's not really a bearish thing. It's not really bearish at all if you don't have any major selling wicks or anything like that. Those are just solid green candles there. So that was a pretty easy trade for me to hold because, you know, even though it was designed as a scalp initially, if we're only going straight up, it's much easier to just kind of let it go, especially when you're in options, because when you're in options and it's stalling to get up and chopping around and stuff, it gets hard to hold because you're losing money even though it's not going down. But that was my morning. Type in chat if you guys have any questions. That pretty much covers all of my trades and all my analysis. So if you guys have questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, that is it for me. No, everyone's good? All right, sweet. Well, I'll go ahead and post this. I did post yesterday's review, but I didn't announce it, so I don't know if really anyone watched it. But we are continuing to be on track. This week's been beautiful so far for options, and it hasn't been that bad for futures either. So hopefully this momentum continues through tomorrow and then the rest of this week, and be a nice week back for my vacation, kicking off the spring. Right. I will see you guys later. You guys have a blessed rest of your night. If I don't see you in the study session later, otherwise, I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning for hopefully another bright green day.